I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The locker room after our championship game was a chaotic blend of sweat, steam, and celebration. 20 guys, all riding the high of a last-minute victory, shouting over each other as water from the showers mixed with the lingering adrenaline in the air. I sat on the bench, unlacing my cleats, watching the scene unfold around me. This team that had become like family over the past 3 seasons. And then there was Jake, our midfielder. The guy whose cross had set up our winning goal just 40 minutes earlier. I've been trying not to stare at him all season, but it was getting harder each game. He had this way of commanding attention without even trying, all easy confidence and genuine warmth that made everyone gravitate toward him, including me, especially me. Let me back up a bit and give you some context. I'd known I was gay since high school, but being on a men's soccer team in college wasn't exactly where I felt comfortable being out. Only 2 of my teammates knew, and Jake wasn't one of them. Not because I thought he'd react badly, he was probably the most open-minded guy on the team, but because telling him felt different somehow, more consequential. The championship game that day had been brutal. November in the Midwest meant freezing rain and a field that was half mud, half ice. The kind of conditions where every tackle feels like hitting concrete, and by halftime, everyone's knees and elbows are scraped raw. We were down 2-1 with 15 minutes left when Jake took over the game. He was everywhere, defending, creating chances, rallying the team with that infectious energy of his. There was this moment, right before he set up our equalizer, when he dribbled past 3 defenders. I was positioned near the far post, and our eyes met for just a second before he delivered the perfect ball for our striker to hammer home. In that brief moment of connection, it felt like we were the only 2 people in the stadium. The roar of the crowd faded away, and there was just Jake, mud-splattered and grinning, looking right at me. After we scored the winner in the final minutes, the team erupted. Guys were piling on each other, coaches were embracing on the sideline, and Jake was at the bottom of a 20-man dogpile, laughing despite being crushed by our entire roster. When we finally made it back to the locker room, the celebration continued, music blasting from someone's portable speaker, guys dancing in towels, coaches bringing in pizza and soda. I was sitting on the bench, halfway through changing, when I noticed Jake wincing as he tried to pull his jersey over his head. During one of those last desperate defensive stands, he'd taken a hard shoulder to his lower back. Nothing serious, but painful enough that our athletic trainer had come over to check on him. "You should ice that," I called out to him, not thinking much of it. We were always looking out for each other like that. Jake nodded, grimacing as he stretched. "Yeah, probably should. Think there's any left in the trainer's room?" I remembered seeing our trainer packing up. "I'll go check," I offered, already heading for the door. It gave me something to do, a way to be helpful without being obvious about my concern for him specifically. The trainer's room was mostly cleared out, but I managed to find an ice pack in the freezer. By the time I got back, Jake had managed to get his jersey and pads off and was sitting on the bench in just his shorts, poking gingerly at the angry red mark blooming on his lower back. "Got the last one," I said, holding up the ice pack like a trophy. "Where does it hurt worst?" He twisted around, trying to point to a spot he couldn't quite reach. "Right there, I think." "Can't really tell." Without thinking, I sat down beside him. "Here, let me." I pressed the ice pack gently against the bruised area, and he hissed through his teeth at the contact before relaxing. "Thanks, man. You're a lifesaver," he said, leaning forward slightly to give me better access to his back. And that's when things got complicated. Because the bench was narrow, and the locker room was crowded, and somehow the most logical position ended up being Jake sitting almost in my lap, his weight partly on my thigh as I held the ice pack against his back. Let me explain why this matters. In a sports locker room, physical proximity is normal. Guys change together, shower together, tape each other's ankles, and help stretch tight muscles without a second thought. But this felt different. This wasn't the casual, thoughtless contact of teammates. This was Jake, warm and solid against me, trusting me to take care of him. "How's that feel?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Cold," he laughed, "but good. I think it's helping already." Around us, the celebration continued. Guys were recounting plays, reliving the winning goal, planning the party that would inevitably happen later that night. No one was paying any attention to us in our corner. It was like we existed in our own bubble, separate from the chaos. I became hyper-aware of every point of contact between us, his weight on my thigh, the heat of his skin beneath my fingers as I held the ice pack, the brush of his shoulder against mine when he shifted position. I found myself holding my breath, afraid that if I moved too much or said the wrong thing, the moment would shatter. "You played amazing today," I said finally, because the silence between us was becoming too loaded. Jake turned his head slightly, and I could see his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the small scar above his eyebrow from a collision in last season's semifinals. So did you? That tackle in the 83rd minute saved our asses. I hadn't thought he'd noticed that play. It wasn't flashy, just necessary, a last-ditch slide to prevent their forward from getting a shot off. Just doing my job, I said. Always so modest, he replied, and I could hear the smile in his voice. One of these days you'll learn to take a compliment. We fell quiet again, but it was a comfortable silence now. I adjusted the ice pack, my fingers accidentally brushing against the warm skin of his side. If he noticed, he didn't react. After about 10 minutes, I realized the ice pack was melting, water dripping down Jake's back and onto my shorts. Hey, this is turning into a puddle, I warned him. He started to stand, then winced and sat back down, right onto my lap this time. Sorry, he said quickly, but didn't move away immediately. Got a head rush. And that's when I noticed that my shorts were soaked, not just from the melting ice pack, but because the water had pooled right in my lap where Jake had been sitting. When he finally stood up, there was an unmistakable wet patch on both his shorts and mine. Dude, you're soaked, he laughed, grabbing a towel from his locker and tossing it to me. Sorry about that. I caught the towel, grateful for something to do with my hands. No worries. How's the back feeling? He twisted experimentally. Better, I think. Still sore, but I'll live. He pulled a dry shirt from his bag and tugged it on. You coming to the party tonight? Coach rented out that bar on 4th Street. The question was casual, normal, as if we hadn't just spent 15 minutes in what felt to me like an intensely intimate position. Yeah, of course, I said, trying to match his tone. Wouldn't miss it. As Jake turned back to his locker, I noticed one of our teammates, Miguel, watching us with a raised eyebrow. Miguel was one of the 2 people on the team who knew I was gay, and his expression was a clear, what was that about? I just shrugged slightly, hoping he wouldn't make a big deal of it. The rest of the team was starting to file out, heading for the parking lot and the celebration beyond. Jake slung his bag over his good shoulder and paused by my bench. Need a ride to the bar? I'm not drinking tonight because of this, he gestured to his back, so I can be designated driver. The offer surprised me. Usually, Jake would be at the center of any celebration, the life of the party. You sure? I don't want to keep you from enjoying the victory. He smiled, that easy, genuine smile that always made something twist in my chest. Trust me, I'll enjoy it plenty. Besides, someone's got to make sure you actually show up instead of going home to study or whatever boring thing you do instead of celebrating. It was true that I wasn't usually the most enthusiastic participant in team parties. Fine, I conceded. But only because you're injured and I feel responsible. Whatever works, he laughed, heading for the door. Meet you in the parking lot in 5. After he left, Miguel sidled over, his expression curious. So, he said quietly, you and Jake looked cozy. I rolled my eyes, trying to play it off. He needed ice on his back. I was helping. Uh-huh, Miguel nodded, unconvinced. And that's why he was practically sitting in your lap for 15 minutes? The bench is narrow, I defended, feeling my face heat up. It wasn't like that. Miguel held up his hands in surrender. Hey, I'm not judging. Just observing that our straight teammate seemed very comfortable getting up close and personal with you. I threw my wet towel at him. Don't start. He doesn't know, and it wasn't anything. But as I finished changing and headed for the parking lot, I couldn't help replaying those 15 minutes in my mind. The weight of Jake against me, the trust in that simple act of letting me help him, the casual way he'd invited me to ride with him to the party. None of it meant what I wanted it to mean. I knew that. Jake was just being Jake. Friendly, open, comfortable in his own skin. The party that night was exactly what you'd expect from a team celebration, loud, crowded, full of replays of the game's best moments that got more exaggerated with each telling. Jake, true to his word, stuck to water and soda, occasionally wincing when someone slapped him on the back too enthusiastically. We ended up sitting at a corner table for much of the night, watching our teammates get progressively more rowdy. It was the longest time we'd ever spent just talking, away from practice and games and the rest of the team. I learned that he was worried about his upcoming organic chemistry final, that his parents were getting divorced after 25 years of marriage, that he had a secret passion for baking that his roommates teased him about. In turn, I told him about my struggle to decide between med school and physical therapy, about my little sister's battle with depression, about how soccer had been my safe space since I was 7 years old. I didn't tell him I was gay, though the words hovered on the tip of my tongue several times throughout the night. Around midnight, as the party showed no signs of winding down, Jake leaned over. "Want to get out of here? My back's killing me from these chairs." I nodded, relieved at the suggestion. As much as I loved the team, the noise and crowd were starting to wear on me. We said our goodbyes, enduring the good-natured ribbing about leaving early, and headed out to Jake's car. The night was cold and clear, our breath fogging in the air as we walked across the parking lot. There was a moment, as Jake unlocked the car, when he looked over at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Thanks for today," he said. "For the ice, and for keeping me company tonight." Something in his tone made me pause. Of course. That's what teammates do, right? He nodded slowly. Right. Teammates. Then he smiled, that same easy smile, and the moment passed. "Let's get you home before you turn into a pumpkin, Mr. Always in bed by midnight." The drive to my apartment was quiet, just the low hum of the radio playing some indie song I didn't recognize. When Jake pulled up outside my building, I hesitated before getting out. "You should put more ice on that when you get home," I said. 20 minutes on, 20 off. He nodded. "Yes, doctor." Then, more seriously, "I had fun tonight. We should hang out more, outside of team stuff." My heart did a stupid little flip that I immediately tried to suppress. "Yeah, definitely," I agreed, trying to sound casual. "Good night, Jake. And great game today." "Night," he replied, waiting until I reached the door before driving away. I stood in the entryway of my building for a long moment after his taillights disappeared around the corner. The memory of his weight against me, the sound of his laughter at the bar, the way he looked at me in the parking lot, all of it swirled together in my mind, creating a confusion of hope and caution. The next few weeks were a strange dance of moments that might have meant something or nothing at all. Jake started sitting next to me on the bus to away games. He'd text me random thoughts at odd hours, a meme about organic chemistry at 2 a.m., a question about my opinion on the best pizza in town in the middle of the afternoon. We started studying together at the library, sometimes joined by other teammates, sometimes just the two of us. And I started noticing things. The way his eyes would linger on me sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking. How he'd find reasons to touch me, a hand on my shoulder, a playful shove, sitting close enough that our knees touched under library tables. It was maddening, trying to interpret these signals from someone I'd always assumed was completely straight. Miguel noticed too. "Either he's into you," he said one day after practice, "or he's the most physically affectionate straight guy I've ever met." I didn't know what to think. The possibility that Jake might be interested in me seemed too good to be true, but the alternative, that I was reading too much into normal friendly behavior, seemed increasingly unlikely. It all came to a head during finals week. We were studying in my apartment, books and notes spread across the living room floor, both of us punchy from too much caffeine and too little sleep. Jake had been acting strange all night, distracted, fidgety, starting sentences and then abandoning them mid-thought. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Okay, what's going on with you tonight? You've read the same page like 5 times. He looked up, startled, then ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd come to recognize. "Sorry. I've been thinking about something. About that day after the championship." My heart stuttered. "What about it?" "When you were helping me with the ice," he continued, his eyes fixed on the textbook in front of him. "And then at the party after. And pretty much every day since then." I waited, hardly daring to breathe, as he struggled to find the words. "I've never—" He started, then stopped. "I mean, I always thought I was, but then with you, it's different." Understanding dawned slowly. "Jake," I said carefully, "are you trying to tell me that you might not be as straight as you thought?" He looked up then, relief and anxiety warring in his expression. "I don't know what I am. I just know that being around you makes me feel something I've never felt before. And it scares the hell out of me, but it also feels right." The confession hung in the air between us, changing everything and nothing all at once. I realized I needed to be honest too. "I should probably tell you," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "that I'm gay. I haven't told many people on the team, just Miguel and Coach, but I've known for a long time." Jake nodded slowly. I kind of wondered. Not in a stereotyping way, just, sometimes the way you looked at me made me think maybe you felt it too. I repeated. "This thing between us." "Yeah," he said softly. "This thing." We were sitting cross-legged on the floor, notes forgotten between us. Slowly, deliberately, Jake reached across the papers and took my hand. His palm was warm against mine, slightly calloused from years of soccer. "I don't know what happens next," he admitted. I've never done this before. I squeezed his hand gently. Neither have I. Not with someone who matters this much. And that was the truth of it. Jake mattered in a way no one else ever had. He was my teammate, my friend, and now potentially something more. Something that had started with melting ice and wet shorts in a locker room and had grown into this moment of vulnerability and possibility. We can figure it out together, I told him. No rush, no pressure. Just us figuring things out at our own pace. The relief in his smile was palpable. I'd like that, he said, and the weight of those simple words settled comfortably between us. We didn't study much more that night. Instead, we talked about when I first realized I was gay, about the moments he'd started questioning his own sexuality, about our fears and hopes for what this might mean for us individually and together. It was hours of conversation that felt both brand new and like we'd been having it all our lives. When Jake finally left around 2 a.m., he paused at the door. "Can I try something?" he asked, a nervous edge to his voice. I nodded, already guessing what he meant. His kiss was hesitant at first, a gentle press of lips that asked more than demanded. But when I responded, leaning into him, his confidence grew. His hands came up to frame my face, and mine found their way to his waist, and for a few perfect moments, everything else fell away. When we pulled apart, his smile was dazed but certain. "Definitely not straight," he murmured, and we both laughed, the tension breaking into something lighter, full of possibility. I don't know what the future holds for Jake and me. We're taking it day by day, navigating this new territory together. The team doesn't know yet, though Miguel has his suspicions. That's a bridge we'll cross when we're both ready. But I do know this. Sometimes the most meaningful connections come from the most unexpected moments. A championship game, an injury, melting ice in a locker room. The universe works in strange ways, bringing people together through circumstances that seem random but might just be exactly what we need. And as for that ice pack that melted in my lap, well, it might have soaked my shorts, but it also broke the ice between us in ways I never could have imagined. Sometimes, the most awkward moments lead to the most beautiful beginnings. And I wouldn't change a single drop. Total_char_count, 18,742.